Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Salter.
And my name's Matt Walker.
And this is Walacast. This is a podcast where we are going to be talking about some of our favorite anime and the actors who work on them.
So, what was exactly the inspiration for doing this in the first place?
Well, there's not a lot of options for anime-related podcasts out there. I've done a couple searches, and there are a few, but not a lot that focus on the dub actors. And seeing as we're both pretty big dub fans, it's made sense for us to do this.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's definitely a lack of dub love in the world, I think. We are obviously big fans of the dub voice actors and anime in general. We run a fan page and Twitter page about it and everything, so this seemed a logical extension, and we're sort of getting partnered with the Unlocked app and the Unlocked anime group, so this is going to be kind of a fun little project for us to do, and we hope everyone likes it and all that.
Hashtag dub love.
Totally. So what is our first show?
Our first show is one of my top 3 favorites, Your Lie in April. We should note that this will be a spoiler-filled podcast.
Yeah, we'll say when we're about to enter the spoiler zone.
Yeah.
It's coming up, but we're not there quite yet.
Not just yet, because we've only said the title.
Yeah.
So we're going to do Your Lie in April.
And why?
Well, Your Lie in April was a very early show that I watched in my anime career. I've only been watching anime for about 2 years now, and Your Lie in April was, I did a whole list of these. I believe it was number 4 or 5.
Yeah, you spent like 2 hours trying to figure it out.
Oh, there it is. So Your Lie in April was my 6th show that I watched. But it is the first that I vividly remember where I was when I watched it, and my feelings when I watched it. It's also the first show for me that made me realize that anime could be more than a bunch of cartoon people making funny faces and screaming.
And I said, I told you so.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, a little background. I originally got Lauren into anime with using Fate Zero as sort of the jumping off point. And this was actually the first show, I don't know if you remember this, that we watched together that I had not seen originally. So this was going in, totally blind. Obviously, I'd heard about it. I'd heard tons of amazing things about it. It definitely looked right up my alley. I'm a sucker for these emotional tearjerker slice of life kind of anime, so I was super excited to watch that. So I'm really happy to talk about it today and rewatch it for the first time. This is my first rewatch.
I remember when we were watching it, I kept forgetting that you hadn't seen it.
Yeah,
because at that time I didn't know about simuldubs, and I didn't know about like what was new and what wasn't, so I kept saying, "Oh, what's gonna happen?" And Matt kept saying, "I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it."
And this was, this wasn't a simuldub. This was one of those where we had to wait for Netflix. Well, it wasn't Netflix, it was Aniplex. I needed to wait for it to get on Netflix some way for me to legally stream it. But yeah, that's going to be our show for today. Each episode is going to feature a particular show. We're also going to hope to see if we can reach out to some actors and see if we can get their input on it, so stay tuned for that. We are going to be releasing this on the Unlocked app first. We don't know an exact date, and obviously if you're listening to this, you already know the date. And then a time after that, I think within a week or 2, it'll be up on standard platforms, the YouTubes and the iTuneses and the things like that. So hopefully folks can join us in the group and we can chat about it, and we'll do some streams as well post-show release. So look forward to those. And okay, so I'll do a little brief what the show is for the 5 of you out there who have never heard of this. So, Your Lie in April was a show made by A1 Pictures, of fairy tale fame, From the New World fame, shows like that. It is 22 episodes long. It is in the slice of life, drama, comedy, feels genre, I would call it. You have a middle school boy, Kosei Arima, who was a child prodigy of the piano, who suffered some tragic instances in his life and has since sort of lost his music and has kind of sunk into a depression, but he meets this really bright, free spirit of Kaori, and his life completely changes forever. And things ensue from there. There's romance, there's drama, there's tragedy, there's happiness. It's a very good show. So if you have not watched it, pause now, go watch it, and then come back.
Because here lie spoilers.
Yes, from here on, if you keep listening, you have not watched the show, and you get mad at us for spoiling it, it's your own fault.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you go ahead and just let them know who's in the cast, because that is the whole core of our podcast.
True. So I'm not going to go to every single actor, so if I leave off your favorite, I'm sorry, I'm just going to do the main people. So our protagonist, Kosei Arima, is Max Middleman, who you may know from One Punch Man or Alone in the Sea. Is a really good one from him. You've got Erica Lindbeck as our Kaori, our lead female. Erica Mendez plays best friend Tsubaki. We have Carrie Karanen as Seto, the sort of mentor, substitute mother figure for Kosei. You have Erika Harlacher as one of his wonderful rivals, Emmy. We have Takashi, the male rival, played by Eric Scott Kimmerer. And we also have best friend Watari, played by Kyle McCarley. Also, this is directed and script adapted by Mr. Patrick Seitz. Interestingly, this is Patrick's first full venture into script adaptation. We'll definitely get to that in a little while. Mm-hmm. All right, so did you have a first topic you wanted to go into?
Well, one of the first major notes I have, the manga versus the anime.
I totally have that.
Wow, it's like we're best friends or something. Yeah. Because as early as episode 2 on this rewatch, I was thinking, oh my gosh, how can you read the manga when you have this beautiful score and the aesthetically beautiful animation of this show?
You often have this sort of almost rivalry sometimes, the anime versus the manga. A lot of people are in the camp, of course, oh, the manga did it better. The anime is just a pale adaptation. Because, anime is a different format, you've got to fit in these 20-minute intervals, you've got to cut a lot of stuff to fit into seasons. That all makes sense. But this show, to me, it seems bizarre that it is a manga. Mm-hmm. Because music is so key. The visuals add so much, which is its own topic that I want to talk about later. And how is this appreciated to its full extent with just still black and white pictures with no music? I mean, you could look up the music and you could play it in the background if you wanted to, which, if I was doing that, I totally would, because I don't understand how else. But even so, you still don't get the same, almost you are there feeling of being in the concert hall, listening to these people play these beautiful songs.
When we went to Anime Expo 2015, which was my first convention, it was fairly soon after. It was like 2 years ago. It's crazy.
It feels like forever.
It was pretty soon after we watched this show, and I remember wanting to get the manga, and I remember the exact booth that we were in, and I opened the page and I was like, but there's no music. Like, I can't hear the music while I'm reading the manga, and it's, like you said, visually so stunning that it ultimately made me not get the manga.
Yeah, and neither of us have read the manga. We're going to admit that. And as a general rule on the show, we're not going to really talk about comparisons, even if we have read the source material, because this is sort of just judging the show on its own merits. But maybe when we do our little streams and our discussions, maybe if you guys have read the manga and have seen the show, I would love to hear what you think about that. Like, is the manga worthwhile, even despite losing a lot of this stuff? Is this one of those where the anime truly is the best way to experience this story? Or is it not? Is there something to it? I would definitely like to know.
Yeah, I want to know what people would take from the manga that they couldn't take from the anime, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, the manga's got more time and can flesh out maybe some characters better. If it has more, like, of Tsubaki, like her sort of story, I think that would be great. That might be worth looking at. I think that would be an interesting thing to discuss.
Speaking of Tsubaki,
okay.
She really does start the show as the girl next door best friend who won't win.
Yep, best friends never win. We all, that's, the old trope.
Which I didn't know about until this show.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really realized how much she is that trope until I rewatched it. And it's pretty obvious early on that it's like, oh, you poor thing.
But I do like the dynamic of, Tsubaki knows him better than anybody else in the world. But she's very similar. She's hyper and outgoing, and she's athletic, and he's this introvert pianist who is into music. And while it does seem like she can enjoy, like, the musical performances, she's definitely not in that world. And then you've got Kaori come in, who is also sort of extroverted, or at least she comes off as that way. We learn some interesting things about her later. She's this free spirit, and she kind of like takes him by the hand and be like, you're coming with me and we're going on an adventure, basically. And of course, she's in that world, and you see that Tsubaki is sort of jealous of the fact that she can share experiences with Kosei that she never will be able to do because she's not a musician. She doesn't really understand that world, which actually I think is why I connect with Tsubaki a lot, because I have some musical experience, but not much, and I was never been one of those people where music moves them. Like, I've never listened to like a classical piece and felt much more than, that's a nice song. I like that. Yeah, it's just not who I am. So like, I definitely relate to her in that way.
I am the opposite. I very much have connection to music. I was raised with music. My family all are musicians, from my grandparents to my parents to my siblings. And I have frequently I've been moved to tears with pieces, not just Broadway and lyrics, but with classical pieces.
I kind of take Broadway as a different thing, because that's not just music. This is like characters telling a story, because that's what I always feel like it's the story that's moving me, and maybe the music enhances that. Yeah, I can't take a piece of music without any context, like again a classical piece or even just a non-classical just song, and it just doesn't. I'm not a heartless person, I swear, believe me. Anime moves me a lot, but yeah, not music. So I definitely had some questions for you about that too. They talk about Kosei's this robot. He just plays what's written. I've never been a part of this world. Like, is that a thing? Like, is there like a school of play what's written versus adapt it to your sort of style, or is that just a thing in this show?
Well, I mean, I've played violin until 8th grade. I don't remember a lot of it. I didn't have great experiences with it. So if any of you are classical musicians out there, let us know.
I want to know this, because I was curious about that.
I keep going back to the other part of music that I know the best, which is Broadway. And, when you adapt a show into a high school or into a college, you don't want to do what they did to originate the performance. You want to make it your own. So I can only imagine that a classical musician does the same thing.
Yeah, I do have a theater background, and I know even professionals will not completely change something, but I definitely will make the performance their own and do little things with it, and I think probably for the better. But I thought that was interesting that there's this, in this show, there's this school of you play what's written, because Chopin was clearly the master, and then you've got people like Kaori who just take it and run with it and make it their own. And obviously the show is leaning toward that way is superior in almost every instance, except for the hardcore music judges. Everybody seems to love the idea when people put all this emotion into their piece and make it theirs. So that was kind of just an interesting thing I kind of thought about. That, and I have a note that says musicians are freaks. Because seriously, these people are freaks.
Well,
in a good way,
sometimes.
How? Just how intense they get into their playing, and then they walk off stage and basically collapse in a heap, or Emmy that comes up and grabs Kosei and just kind of stares him down. Just that kind of stuff, and the way they obviously describe the music and all this stuff. It's like, musicians are freaks. They're good freaks, but
you know what it reminds me of? Professional athlete. That's what professional athletes do. They live, breathe, sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I think by definition, if you are at the highest levels of whatever you're doing, you're a freak. You are literally on the fringe. Yeah, again, I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing, but you are on that last end of the bell curve. You are that by definition, you are completely different than almost everybody else. In that respect, not necessarily in your daily life, but yeah.
Does that mean I'm a freak?
Yes.
Side note, I was a professional athlete for several years. That's why I mention it. I was just thinking about the play what's on the page versus play it your own. I think you have to start with play it on the page. That's how, even Kaori, that's how she learned. And then, there was a turning point where she was like, no, you know what? I'm going to just do this instead. So.
Yeah, and I assume they're playing the notes, but they're playing them maybe faster or louder or softer or at a different tone than was originally written down. That's what you're changing. Obviously, your job's been I don't feel like that note here. I'm going to play this one. Or maybe that is. I don't know. I don't know these pieces well enough to know that they're changing anything.
Yeah. I wrote a note here that the switch from the cartoony over-the-top tsundere moments into the serious moments is so well done. It's done so quickly but so effectively that it almost is shocking.
Yeah, and it
very
doesn't
sobering.
It doesn't feel like it's undercutting itself either, which I think can be a problem if you did it in a different way or didn't have your timings down just perfect. And I do love, speaking of those, I love the transition to the very stylized animations of the when there's got these like jagged edges and less detail to sort of illustrate these big comedic high emotion moments. I actually think like because the anime is so beautifully animated and drawn, I think these contrast even more, and they're really like that just enhances the comedy a lot. I think. I really adore those. I actually wish more shows would do that, even especially serious shows like this. Serious shows in quotation marks. So speaking of sort of how it's animated, and I think one thing that helped me sort of connect with it again beyond just the music was, I'm sure you're familiar with synesthesia. This feels like the person who drew this has synesthesia or understands this. Because people talk about seeing the colors of the music, and they animate it like that. Things are much more colorful when there are big, happy, emotional moments. Obviously, you have a color change when Kaori goes from her bright, bubbly self to when she gets sicker and sicker. Like, literally, the tones become grayer and grayer and grayer.
I knew you were going to say it.
And then you do have these really beautiful, sunsets. And, again, a lot of, especially the final scene, which I think we'll talk about in its own thing. This show feels like I'm on synesthesia in a lot of ways. Like, it's like I can see the music. I don't even need to hear it. And I think that actually really helps probably audience members like me who may not connect with the music directly like that. To me, for some reason, emotionally, the visuals translate more than the audio component in a lot of ways, and I thought that enhanced it a lot. Again, I don't know if this person was intending that, but that's what it felt like. It's like, I can see the music, literally, and this is amazing. Like, this is where the animation and the medium really comes in and really makes it something better, something more special and unique, and again, more visceral in a lot of ways.
It definitely made me think, again, if somebody wasn't into classical music, I still think they would like this show. Yeah.
Again, I'm honestly not that into classical music. Again, I can enjoy it, but I don't really know much about it. And yeah, I really enjoy this show, and it doesn't, again, in a lot of ways for me, the music itself doesn't matter. Like, music is important, but what the music is less important. Classical music, okay, it could also be classic rock for all it would have mattered. I think the show would have been practically the same.
I don't. I think that, especially the pieces that they chose, and, they explain why Kaori chooses these pieces, they explain that throughout the show. But I think if it was, like, the Beatles or something, I don't think it would be quite as powerful.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I think you'd have to change certain things, but I think it's the passion for the thing and the way that everyone feels from it. And so whatever that is, you can make it. I think that's actually one of anime's really good aspects. I have a note about this, is making oftentimes relatively banal things become incredibly exciting. I don't think, again, maybe this is my bias, but I don't think people go into a lot of symphonies and think, I am so freaking hyped and excited, like I'm really pumped. They may be looking forward to it, and obviously, again, it can definitely move you, but excitement isn't necessarily a thing, but this brings excitement to this guy's playing. You get all these dramatic moments of, obviously, when Kosei's, shifts from, banging on the keys to, when it clicks for him, things like that. It makes these performances super riveting to watch and to listen to. And again, I don't even care what the music is. The context of it, hooks me more than anything else.
I mean, back to my defense of the classical music emotion, I put the last note that I have, or not the last note, sorry, the first note of episode 4 that I have is that was my first moment of goosebumps, is that performance with Kaori and Kosei for the first time is just, I think it's the music, but the visuals too. I mean, everything just...
Yeah. Again, I think that's going to be a personal thing.
Yeah.
Because you have that connection, it connects to you that way. For me, it doesn't. The only exception was Kosei's final piece.
So
which
good.
I don't even remember what it was. Again, it doesn't matter to me. It's not about it. But, someone mentioned the kind of the loneliness of it. That really did come through at the beginning and especially the very end. So I kind of I felt a little bit on that. But yeah, again, I think that's going to be a personal thing. But interesting to hear the difference.
Yeah. I mean, it just, with the whole swell of the performance, and then that shock of Kaori collapsing on stage. Like, without any prior warning. Because at that point, we don't know anything is going on with her.
Yep. Yeah, you think she's just some girl.
Mm-hmm. I really do think that Kaori is one of the most genuinely good characters in anime. Like, good-hearted characters.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
I feel like she's just one of those characters who's so positive and so... I mean, she has her struggles too, but she doesn't let them define her.
She's definitely one of those positive, at least what we see. Mm-hmm. You do get glimpses into her, like, actual inner terrified self, which I think actually some of the best moments of the show. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, like, Kaori, I don't like that personality as much. Like, I almost can feel her forcing it, because that's not who she really is. Like, really? She is actually this shy bookworm. She, like, makes this conscious decision to change, and that's great, and I can see her, like, that's part of her now. Like, you know, and you see that later, she is putting on a front in a lot of ways. She's, in deep down, she's terrified of what she knows is coming. You learn at the end that she basically knew she was dying the entire time we see her. That she made the conscious change to kind of seize life and do that, which is great. And I don't doubt that that's genuine, but I don't know. It's the reason why I like Tsubaki a lot better. She feels like a more real person in a lot of ways. Kaori seems like the perfect, good, free spirit to lock in the audience and make them fall in love with her right away. And I feel like, I see you, anime. I know what you're doing. And again, I'm not immune. I like it too, but I see what you're doing.
Well, I don't know. I think I don't much like Tsubaki, in that I think not only does the latching on to Kosei bother me, because she does it the whole show, is she's very much... I think she knows that Kosei won't ever look at her the way that she wants him to look at her, and yet she still goes after that.
See, I disagree. In fact, I think the ending sets it up that he might end up looking at her that way.
But that makes me think it's just out of the fact that she survived. And I hate that.
See, I don't think that's the way. Like, maybe, you know, Kaori, like, they would have had a life together, Kaori and Kosei, if Kaori had survived. But she didn't, and Kosei's gonna have to move on eventually.
But what would make him move on to Tsubaki if he's never gone to Tsubaki in the years that they've known each other? That's what I... Like, again, is it just going to be, oh, well, you're there? But
I think Kosei's never looked at anyone that way. And now he's looked at Kaori that way, so he'll probably look at other people that way. And I think there is feelings there. You see that he cares for her. You know, and maybe it never will, but I think there's definitely a possibility. And I don't think she's forcing herself on him. Like, I didn't see it as a latching on.
I saw it from pretty early on, but maybe that's just because I didn't relate to her.
Yeah, like, I don't interpret it that way. And in fact, she's not really with him all that much.
I guess not.
Like, really, if you look at the scenes, there are not that many with just them together.
But they don't have to be together, because every time I felt like every time Tsubaki was on the screen, she was talking about Kosei, and it was like, okay, child, I understand that you like him, but there's another girl.
Yeah, I mean, and she was being polite and wasn't trying to,
Yes, to her credit, she was not trying to get in the way of them, which is good. I don't know. I don't like the fact that I feel like she spent the whole show pining. I don't like pining characters.
I didn't see, I definitely did, but I don't feel like it was the whole show at all. It was definitely, especially a lot of her with Rando friend, who I don't remember her name, Tsubaki's friend.
She says it a couple times.
Yeah. I don't know, Tsubaki just felt like more of a real character to me than Kaori did. At least with the times that Kaori was being her happy self. Like, Kaori felt like a real person when she was breaking down and crying and desperately, saying, I don't want to die. Like, that's like, yeah, okay, now you're an actual person. I see, like I want to see more of that. I don't want you to be sad, but I want to feel like you're just being you. Because I think, this is one of the topics, is the show, Your Lie in April. We're supposed to kind of assume that the lie they're talking about is the one that Kaori says she tells at the very end. I told one little lie. Kaori likes Watery. That's the one little lie. But I feel like there are a lot of others that I think lying is actually a big theme of the show. And I think, Tsubaki lies to herself, she denies her feelings, and then she ends up, of course, pining. You've got the sort of fake it till you make it kind of lie that you as a performer tell, like, you're not going to show the nerves, you're just going to go out there. And that usually works for you. But then I feel like Kaori's got the lie that she is this sunshiny person that has no fear. But deep down, that's not really her.
See, I don't see it as a lie. I have some experience with putting on a front to fake out the world, which I guess it by definition means you're lying. I feel like that joy that she brings and that the positivity she brings isn't a lie per se. I think she is making herself that way it's so hard to explain. It's a coping mechanism, I think, and it's a necessary one. And I don't think it's a lie. I think it's something that she needs to do to get through another day. And I think that is an extension of her personality. I don't think it's a front.
Okay, I guess I should say I don't, I think it's a role that she's fulfilling. It doesn't mean it's not a true role, but I don't know, like I want to see the rest of Kaori. I don't just want to see this part of you. I find the scenes where she's letting that part of herself go a little bit much more interesting. Positivity is nice. One of my favorite characters is Hajime from Gatchaman Crowds. She feels like that's who she is. That doesn't feel like that's all that Kaori is. But I guess what I mean is, like, she's more than that, and I want to see the rest of that. Because just that part makes her feel like not a full-on person in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know, I feel like I'm not explaining myself correctly. In general, the best scenes with her, to me, were not the ones where she was super happy. The best parts were, to me, where she was saying what's in her gut. And the scene where she's on the roof, where she was crying into Kosei's arms, I don't want to die. And again, this is another topic I want to go into, the whole premise of the show is one ginormous deception. I'm Kaori, I'm in love with Kosei. I'm not going to tell him this. I'm going to pretend to be in love with his friend. I'm going to get close to him, but in a friend way. I'm going to purposely put him at arm's length, but I'm going to spend a ton of time with him. I'm going to drag him out of his funk and never once reveal your feelings to this guy. But you want to make as many happy memories as you can before your end, and you know that the end is coming.
You make her sound like a villain.
I don't think this is a bad thing, but I feel like, girl, the easier way is to start to find a way to connect with him, and then once you've got him in love with you, which you had him in love with you really early on, is maybe see where that might go.
But she explains why she doesn't do that.
Yeah,
I don't know, I'm very much for defending Kaori.
I hear that explanation, but I feel like I don't know. Again, it maybe makes the less interesting show. But I feel like this time around, that whole sort of premise felt slightly like it's playing on my suspension of disbelief and making this a little bit harder.
I would agree that I think that whole backstory of Kaori's was unnecessary. I don't think that we needed any of that for the plot, especially right at the end. I think if you had deleted all of that, the backstory that we got from her letter, it still would have been an immensely powerful show.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that in a lot of ways, that letter, again, it feels like it undermines what we just watched.
Yeah, I would agree.
If I have one major criticism of this show, it's that. I had the note was, okay, wait, what is the plan? Because she explains this convoluted thing she wants to do, and that's what we learn was sort of the impetus of this whole thing. It's like, really?
My note was, this is a long-ass letter.
That too. That is a long letter. I will give Erica Lindbeck credit. It was actually beautifully read, and it was one of my favorite parts of her performance. But yeah, I feel like that's that letter is a lot of what informs my feelings of her character. I feel like this undermines you as a real person.
If I had my druthers and I was on the editing room, I would just deleted all of that. But I'm not, and I'm not the mangaka, and I'm not the creator of the anime.
I should say again, this is I might sound like I'm really harshing on this right now, but I don't have that much to criticize, so I'm gonna get it in when I can, and it's part of the reason why I have the show as a 9 and not a 10, because I think that is a little bit of a plot issue. Again, it didn't feel that way as much the first time, But again, the first time I'm just watching it. This time I'm watching it and I'm also taking notes. I'm going, wait a minute. What? That's what's happening here? Okay, whatever. Also, Calorie in glasses and twin tails, so much better.
I disagree.
So much better.
Geez, you would.
At least the glasses, come on. She's adorable like that.
I think you will be happy to know I upgraded my rating of the show.
Oh,
it was only an 8.
Womp, womp.
I say only with
only an
air
8.
quotes. And I upgraded it to a 9. So it has been promoted. And it was already a show that I desperately wanted to watch again. Because this was my second watch, so my first rewatch. But really it was my first watch because so much has happened to me since the first time I've watched the show that it was just like starting over. I have copious notes of, I don't remember this.
So what I was interested to, so on the kind of topic of second walkthroughs and kind of how things change, I was curious if there were any parts that sort of like were emotionally resonant in the first walkthrough that maybe were less so here, or vice versa. Because I had one that was way different. Actually, a couple from first to second.
Well, like I was just saying, I don't remember a lot of my first show, or my first watch of the show, for a few reasons. I don't remember... I remember being emotional about it, and I remember it resonating with me, but I don't remember exactly when, except for the end, because I know that I didn't cry. I think they expected us all to cry, and it was more just emotional. With this time, I don't remember the episode, but I remember texting you and saying, why am I emotional? I'm not even at the end.
Do you remember what part it was?
I think it was Claire de Lune.
Okay.
But there's so many places. I really do think it was Claire de Lune, and then...
Remind me what part that was.
Episode 15, when Tsubaki... it's Tsubaki's big episode.
Okay.
Where at one point she yells, would you just forget about Claire de Lune already?
Okay.
It's one of my favorite classical pieces, which is why I liked it a lot. The emotion that Erica Mendez brings out in that episode, and the whole show, is, I think, really hit me in that episode.
I don't know what it is, but when Erica Mendez's characters cry, it is the most devastating thing to listen to ever. I don't know how she does it. Those of you will probably...
Acting.
Yeah, but I mean, other people act and they cry, and it hits you, but like, for some reason, not like that. Like, it really feels like this person is like dying on the inside, and it's like, I don't want you to die on the inside. If you all start following this, you will probably figure out that Erica Mendez is my favorite voice actor. So I adore almost everything that she is in, and yeah, it's a really good role for her. And yeah, that part and a couple others really. I think she just does really well. The big hyperactive excited moments too. Just like that works for her so well.
My note for episode 20 is when the little tiny Kosei and little tiny Tsubaki are in the rain, and Kosei gives Tsubaki lemonade to give her vitamin C, and you just hear, vitamin C.
Yeah, I remember
and it's
that.
my favorite, and I wrote that note all the way across my notebook.
But so this watch through, one sort of section that for some reason really started getting to me was his little apprenticeship with Nagi. I think she's a really fun character. It seems kind of like a weird diversion where it is. It's like, wait, what are we doing right now? He's got a student? And actually the first time I saw her, I totally thought it was Seto's kid grown up. I was like, wait, what? How did you age so fast? How much time has gone by? And I was like, oh, wait, no, this is a new character. This is so weird. Because she has like the same hair. Also, the drawing of the kid is weird and creepy to me. I'm the only one that's got like she's just got black circles. Like, what is... Okay, anyway. A diversion. But anyway, like...
It's an anime artistic choice. It's like a trope, almost. The younger characters either have the really small dot eyes or the really, really huge eyes.
Yeah.
It just goes to show
I guess I'm used to the huge eyes. I don't see the dot eyes that much. It's, like, for me, it's creepy now. Anyway. But that whole, like, kind of, Seto coming back into his life, then, forcing him to take on Nagi as an apprentice, basically, and using that as a tool to sort of bring him out of his own funk and making him, like... forge a bond with a new person, and then obviously tackle a piece with her, and then just them playing together. I love the sort of dynamic between those two, to the point that that's actually one of my favorite relationships in the show, is Nagi and Kosei. And I love her, like, repeating, like, that's such a cliche.
Yeah.
And then her final line is, oh no, I'm falling for a cliche, like, because she's falling for Kosei. Like, that would be such a cliche. And then, of course, Stephanie Sheh, who plays Nagi, is perfect as these, like, little feisty, younger characters. But yeah, for some reason, like, when they were playing, it was like, this was one of those times where, like, I all of a sudden realized that, like, I'm getting slightly, like, sniffly. It's like, what's happening to me? It doesn't feel like there's any particular reason for this to be happening. I'm getting emotional right here, man. What's going on?
Yep. I actually just found my notes for that, and that is one place where I got emotional. I have written in very large letters, "Go Nagi!"
Yeah.
And that whole Tchaikovsky piece with the Sleeping Beauty piece, it's so back and forth, and I love everybody in the audience is egging each of them on.
Yeah.
Like, don't let him take over.
Yeah, this was one of the times where I feel like suddenly listening to piano playing is way more exciting than it has ever been. This is how you make classical music exciting for someone who doesn't really care about classical music, is you do this kind of stuff. And I think it's great for the character, and it's just a genius move as far as the audience is concerned. That one, and for whatever reason, the last episode, the scene on the roof in the hospital was definitely the gut punch of the entire show, and definitely my favorite part with Kaori.
I did think of another one, and my favorite part with Kaori, my favorite performance piece by Lindbeck is, it's pretty early on, I think the second time Kaori collapses, but she collapses in the hall of her house, and she screams at her legs to work. And that was just...
That is
a gut punch.
Yeah, that's a very raw moment.
Like, when your body betrays you, that is the kind of emotion that's what you feel. And that was an incredible performance.
Definitely. Speaking of performances, I do think we should touch on our protagonist, Max Mittelman's Kosei. I definitely think Max kind of came on the scene out of nowhere around the time of this show, maybe a little earlier, it seemed like. He's gotten quite a few leads in sort of Aniplex and other, Bang Zoom, LA dubbed shows. And, like, he really does the sort of emotionally reserved character extremely well. But this is one of the first times, at least for me, that we got to see him also display some really raw emotion. And just what I really loved is those scenes where he's kind of breaking down, and sometimes he's crying. One thing that he does really well is, and I remember in one of my old drama classes, and they were talking about big emotional moments, they talked about, like, a lot of people was like, oh, they just go out on stage and they have this sad scene, so they just go out and they cry, and I think that's good. It's like, well, guess what? People don't actually do that. You know what they do? They fight tooth and nail not to cry. They just don't wanna, and you can hear that. No, not good. Like, he's got that, he's really tensing up, like, all the muscles in his face and his jaw and his throat, because he's trying not to cry. And that is so much worse sometimes to listen to, like, emotionally, than just, I'm crying because it's sad. And he had that, like, I'm fighting back tears, but it's not working. I'm dying here inside. And, like, a lot of those moments really worked very well. And then the contrast between the sad, sort of depressed Arima voice and the happy, I'm kind of free again Arima voice was I think very well done as well.
Yeah, he impressed me. And again, I don't remember a lot, so I liked being able to see, the child Kosei and the young adult Kosei and the screaming back and forth with Kaori Kosei.
Yeah.
And the tender moments with Tsubaki Kosei. Is really good role for a voice actor.
Yeah, he had a lot of the role had a lot of range, and he definitely met that challenge, I think, very well. I think another shout out I would like to give is Erika Harlacher this time, the Erika with a K, as I like to say, as Emmy, who is one of the two sort of rivals of Kosei's. Her intensity in some of these scenes, and this is like, some of the characters she tends to play are not my favorite because they're kind of high-pitched and wafy, but, like, this girl had such great intensity, especially when she was, playing the piano and you got her voiceover, look at me, Arima, listen to my sound, like, that kind of stuff was really brilliant. You could really feel that intensity and that emotion pouring out. And I really love Liz. I wish Emmy had a bigger part, actually, because I wanted to hear more from that.
Well, as we continue this podcast, you will learn that I love me some low voices, some low female voices in particular. And I really like Erika in this one. early on I wrote that this was a great role for her. Her character, Emmy, and her performance is totally unassuming at first. And then she just slays with emotion.
Exactly.
Just absolutely, not out of nowhere because she's an actor and she's paid to do this. But it's such a switch. Again, with this show, there are so many of those great switches from yelling and screaming and not really being that serious into bam, no, now we're serious. Like, now I am fighting for my life through a piano and fighting to be noticed. And her whole character is just, it's so well done by her. She really did a good job. This, I think, it's probably my favorite role from her now.
That would be up there for me too. Though she's definitely kicking ass as ruler right now in Fate Apocrypha. I like that. And then the last person I definitely want to touch on actor-wise is Kari Karanen, who voices my favorite character of the show, Seto, who is Japan's #1 pianist, I believe, and sort of, as she calls herself, Kosei's substitute mom, and just a total badass in that role.
Yeah, she's pretty great.
Yeah, I love her just no-nonsense personality, but can be like this surprisingly tender, and I love how Carrie's transition from those, I'm in charge, you're gonna listen to me, I'm this mature woman who's very confident in herself and is gonna fix the situation here, to being kind of the mom figure and, hey kid, that kind of, it's really sweet. And of course, Seto's the mom that you wish Kosei had, but doesn't, sadly. And just like, I love her dynamic with him. I like her scenes with some of the other characters like Nagi and things like that. And she's a really, like, for some reason, like, I'm just really drawn to this character. And Carrie, like, and I love when Carrie plays these more mature roles. And I would probably say this is probably my first or second favorite performance. It's hard to top Satsuki, but
dang,
but this
that is big.
Yeah. Again, she just fits this really well. I think this is, if I had to say one perfect casting choice, this is probably it.
I really like this kind of character, the younger pseudo mom or mentor. It's one of my favorite.
Yeah, she's a great mentor character.
I have a lot of Hiroko is awesome notes. And one, Seto, you gentle soul.
Yeah.
Also, did you notice that she's repping a Dodger shirt? Yeah.
I totally did.
I thought of you. I was like, okay, writing a note about that.
That is awesome.
It was great. So, Carrie is the first voice that I remember hearing again. And actually, I think she's the first voice that I was able to identify, which is saying a lot because I watched a lot of high-profile anime as my first couple.
Yeah, we dove into the deep end.
Yeah, I mean, Fate Zero, Toradora, Little Witch, Psycho-Pass, Your Lie in April, Madoka. Those were my first shows. Those are some intense shows to start a brand new medium with. And Carrie's is the first voice that I remember saying, oh, I know that voice from somewhere. And that was before I knew the actors' names, and I think I asked Matt at some point, was like, wait, isn't this? And especially when we got to Satsuki, except with Satsuki, I could not recognize her. And because Matt had said, hey, do you know who this is? I bet you can't guess who this is.
Yeah, you had like Mommy, which sounds totally different than Satsuki. Satsuki's just such a great role. I'm so glad that she played that.
And I mean, the first role that I heard from her is Maya in Fate Zero, and that's another low register. Again, low registers are just my heaven. So I like Hiroko a lot because of the fact that this is the one that I recognized Carrie in, and that just, it makes me happy that I remembered that. So that's a good role for her.
Definitely. So what do you think about Mr. Seitz's vision and adaptation of the show?
Well, I don't know a lot about, directing and ADR, so it's hard to know what, obviously I think it came off very well. It's a very well-known show, not just because it's a heart-wrenching show, but I think, a lot of even relatively casual anime fans know about Your Lie in April.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that this show has gotten that kind of exposure. And that could, Aniplex helps with that. But there's something to be said about a really good adaptation and a really good direction. Because, the casting, for starters, is, a big choice. How about you?
Before people say anything, we know that the ADR directors from the Aniplex stuff do not have final say in casting, but obviously they're going to have some input.
They have some weight.
Yeah. One thing that stood out more so than the direction, which all seemed appropriate, nothing crazy, and I don't think there were any sort of incorrect choices or choices I would disagree with that I can think of anyway. But one thing what definitely stood out was the writing. I think there was a lot of the lines, especially these, again, sometimes I have to remind myself, these are middle school kids. Doesn't feel like it, but they are. They speak in a lot of ways in this very poetic sort of language, and I had to know, like, if this were a different show, I think I'd hate this, because it would sound ridiculous. But because we've got classical music as sort of the thematic setting, having poetic speech seems to just work with it, even if it maybe is a little bit less believable that middle schoolers would come up with these lines and thoughts on their own. But I think it works here, and obviously some of the lines really are very beautiful, but sort of break the realism slightly.
I have an example.
Yeah?
If I may.
Sure.
In episode 11, Watari says, "See the stars? They're always out, but they shine brightest at night." And that's the kind of, it's like, it could be eye-rolling.
Yeah,
it could be like, okay.
It's skating that line, and I think every once in a while there's one that sort of went a little over that line for me. I was like, all right, that maybe didn't land as much as I...
But in the context of that scene, it's Watari and Kosei alone, and they're walking under the stars after, Kaori's in the hospital and all of this has gone down, and it's so quietly said that it fits seamlessly into the scene.
Yeah, again, this show makes this stuff work. Again, but I was very aware that a different show in a different setting or a different art style, I don't know, would fall so, like, hard on the line of, like, wait a minute, what? Nobody talks like that, get out of here.
Yeah.
But no, that it works here. And I think, again, I don't know the original Japanese, I don't know how poetic the original Japanese lines were, but I think this was certainly a conscious choice, because if you look at his most recent show that is very much like this in tone, Anohana, you don't have people talking like that as much. They do say some sort of poignant lines, but they feel a little bit more...
childish.
Or just like more like a layman would, like just a normal person would say them this way. And I think, yeah, if you took this style of language and put it in that show, it would fall flat, just go wrong. But yeah, I thought that was just something that kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't really pick up on it as much the first time. And I do think he did a really good job overall. The sort of more normal dialogue, I think, is done really well. When these characters get voiceovers, which they do very often, suddenly, obviously, you can do so much more because flaps are not a thing. We don't have to worry about them.
Yay!
And those are some of the best moments as far as just the acting and directing and writing goes.
I wrote another of Kaori's lines, which was when Kosei is performing his solo in a competition. All three of the friends are in the audience, and Tsubaki is super nervous and everything, and Kaori says, "He could play chopsticks for all I care. What matters is that he's here," which I loved. See, when we were talking about Kaori's putting on a front, I think that positivity is what makes Kosei into being able to go up on the stage.
That's the realness. Like, that's a moment that I feel like I'm seeing real Kaori. That's positivity in a way that feels that's actually grounded versus I'm gonna stand on a kid's plaything and play the melodica and just demonstrate that I'm being this kind of fun, crazy, free spirit kind of lady, which I don't think is, again, it's not fake, but it doesn't feel like the core of her, but that does.
But he wouldn't have done any of that if she had been like that the whole time. Because that free spirit in her, I think, is what woke him.
Yeah, I think she picked up on that's what he needed. But again, like, that's why those moments were my favorite of hers, not the ones where, she was being the canalés loving, wacky friend.
Can we get canalés? Because I would really like to know what is the big deal about them.
I don't exactly know what a canalé is. Is it like an eclair? That's in my brain. That's what it is in my head, because I'm sure it isn't, but that's the closest thing I can latch onto.
I almost got some. I was like, where is there a bakery nearby where I can go get canalés?
We don't even see much of a shot of them for me to say what they are. You barely ever see them, and when you do, they're being scarfed down and they're sort of stylized a little bit. It's like, I don't even know. I still don't know what these things are.
Okay, I'm going to get some canalés, and we're going to try them, and then let all of you know what they're like.
How canalés are. Yes. Are they worth the hype? Stay tuned. More at 11.
I wrote down one of my favorite Tsubaki moments was when Kosei is on stage when Kaori is going through her operation, second to last episode, it's dead silent. It's very serious. He can't focus on anything, and everything is quiet. And then you hear Tsubaki sneeze and say, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
and it's again
that was great.
One of those moments that switches from in this case dramatic to funny, but it works. And it just that's what snaps Kosei out of his...
Yeah, because that's the thing. It works because it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
It snaps him out of this funk and puts his attention to the audience and then kind of makes him back to the moment.
I wanted to know what you think of the show in terms of... trying to think of how to word this topic. Well, the note I have, all I wrote was how people react to trauma and depression. I think this show shows not perfect examples of, but in my experience with depression, I feel like it shows pretty close to what some coping mechanisms are. I think this show, for me, came around when I was struggling in my own life, with retiring from a sport to moving across the country and suddenly not having an identity anymore from what I perceived as not having an identity. So this show was kind of right in the heart of that depression of mine, which you, Matt, weren't living. We weren't roommates at that time. We were fairly newly reconnected, I guess. But you kind of got the brunt of my experiences with depression, albeit just through text messages.
Yeah. Which, you can only go so far, but I got the picture.
Yeah. When I was going back to figure out which number show this was, that's part of why I don't remember is, depression can cause some short-term memory losses. And I have a lot of fadey memories, but I was going back through the text to see the timestamps of when we watched it. I went through so many text messages because Matt and I text all the time. And I really got to journey back and see how in the dark I was. And I remember this show being kind of that golden glimmer of taking myself out of my situation and putting me into media, which doesn't happen a lot with me. And that, again, is why the show is so powerful for me, because it was like, oh, this is anime, but this is making me forget that I'm watching an anime. Like, this is a story. This is not just... I don't know. It's not like One Punch Man. It's not like
it's not a big. It's not a fantasy epic, and it's not It feels like a story that could be told in real life. Like this seems like, for the most part, this could happen.
Yeah. So I connected a lot with both of the main characters for different reasons. I was saying earlier that Kaori, with her putting on a front, is very much familiar with me, which caused me this time to get emotional because I remember having to put up a facade of happiness and carefree joy. Oh yeah, I'm just, I'm moving to Seattle. I'm taking a new step. Where inside, it was, one of the hardest points of my life. And then with Kosei, he gets moments of just literally crippling fear and anxiety where he can't move. And he can't hear and he can't see. And I don't have a lot of experience with that amount of it, but there are definitely moments where, your head just spirals. And so I think, for the most part, it was pretty good representation for my experiences. But from somebody who doesn't have a lot of personal experience with trauma, do you think that the show was portraying coping mechanisms in a good way?
I'm not necessarily comfortable with the word good say like it's like a judgment, but it does seem in a realistic way. And there are definitely moments I did notice where you have like someone going through one of those sort of episodes where sometimes especially the younger friends will be with them and they have no idea what the hell to do or how to treat them. That was actually, I thought, one of the better portrayals, is because you just don't. You don't want to say the wrong thing to make it worse, but you want to help them. But then what do you do? Because you obviously don't have any idea what they're going through. The most obvious was the one when Kaori's at the hospital. You get this sort of awkward, like, what?
I don't know what to say is what he says.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do I say? How do you act around this person? And you suddenly feel incredibly aware of everything you're saying, and you feel like you don't want to say the wrong thing or else it's gonna set off something terrible. And I liked the fact that a lot of times people didn't know what to say or what to do. Tsubaki has this too. I don't know how to be there for him. I don't know how to help him. Her friend, I think, gives smart advice of basically like, just be you. He's leaned on you before, and that's what he needs you to be you right now. You know, if he needs a shoulder to cry on, he'll cry on your shoulder. Like, that's like, just let them kind of make the move, and that in that way, that's what I kind of tuned in on. Was a kind of a realistic portrayal. As far as the coping mechanisms, it's hard to tell, like, for me, how realistic that is. Kaori makes it seem pretty easy, and it's probably not. Obviously, we do see a couple breakdown moments, but in general, she seems that maybe it's maybe too easy. Like, she can go from crying and stuff to happy pretty quickly, and maybe quicker than is believable. But of course, we have to move the show along, so
Right.
there's issues there too. But yeah, overall, it seemed to be a good way, and I like that it didn't feel like it was judging anyone for being like this,
totally.
which I think is important. For the most part, the people we cared about never really judged him for being depressed after losing his mom. Kosei never judged Kaori when he learned the truth about her and how scared she really was, or any of that.
So, how would you rank Your Lie in April in your anime collection?
I'd say it's pretty high. Again, I think I gave it a 9 on the old MAL. I do think it is definitely one of the better slice of life shows out there. I think it does a lot of things really well. Visually, it's easily up there with one of the best. I think the characters are really interesting and dynamic. I love the music. Actually, one little side note I didn't touch on was, like, I really like the non-classical parts. I really love the soundtrack. There's a sort of real recurring refrain that actually really, like, hits me a lot because it always comes in these really, like, important parts. And it's like, oh god, there it is again. Oh no. I already know something intense is going to happen here because I hear the music. Anyway, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it again. I will probably watch it again. I would definitely like to own this one. This has gone on my list of shows I definitely want to own at some point in my life. Unfortunately, it's kind of expensive, but hey, whatever. I think the cast did a wonderful job. I really think Patrick Seitz's writing debut, he just nailed it. See more from him. And yeah, I definitely 2 thumbs up. Highly recommend. How about you?
This show, for me, like I've said, is very important to my anime career. It came very early, so I was an impressionable young'un when I watched this show. So watching it again, almost with no memory of it, has been really great, and I really enjoyed it. This is definitely, I think, the first show where I was like, oh, I really want to own that. And then I went to Aniplex, I was like, oh, maybe I'll own that someday, because, yikes, price tag. So it's on the top of my list of things to own after I eventually get Unlimited Blade Works. I rated this show highly at first, and then higher still with the second watch, which I think says a lot because I'm pretty strict in my rankings of shows.
She's a little stricter than I am.
Yeah. And then for me, I think what is the most exciting part of Your Lie in April is that it introduced me to Erica Lindbeck in particular, who I now watch shows specifically to hear her. It's why I watched Love Live, is I needed a Lindbeck show, and Matt suggested Love Live. Yep. So I actively seek her out now. She is one of my favorite voice actors, if not my favorite female voice actor. It also introduced me to another side of Erica Mendez. After Akko from Little Witch Academia, Tsubaki is a very different character.
Totally.
And this is the first show that showed me, oh, shit, this girl has some range on her. And I love that.
She can do anything, obviously.
Yeah. Bias.
What?
Weren't
you just talking about Lindbeck?
What? Listen, I like all the Ericas. All the Ericas have my support. Ericas with K's and C's. Just give them all. Just put them all in one show together.
They are in many shows together, actually. Well, a disproportionate high amount of shows.
Great. Those are the shows I love the most. Hello. My name is Lauren, and I am Erica obsessed. So I very much enjoyed watching this show again, and I will, again, watch it more again.
So there.
Ha! End of story. If you guys watched Your Lie in April, let us know what you thought. We're going to probably be having some chats with the Unlocked members, and you guys can come and chat with us about it. Let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, we'll put a thread in the group. We'll do some streaming on the actual app. Maybe we'll find some other places to put discussion topics. We'll see. So yeah, keep an eye out for those.
Walacast. Thank you so much for listening to our show, Walacast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, we'd love for you to tweet about it. Tell your friends. You can find us on Twitter at The Walla Podcast or at facebook.com/The Walla Podcast. We're so happy to have this opportunity, and we'd love to thank Anime Unlocked for allowing us a platform to launch on. We're going to keep Walacast an Anime Unlocked exclusive for 1 week before broadcasting it on YouTube, iTunes, and your other standard podcast platforms. I think that's it for now. Thanks for joining us. And remember, even in the depths of the darkest oceans, some light always pierces through.